My wife asked me to sign one paper, then I lost everything. My name is Alexander Vaughn. At 48, I believed I had built the perfect life. A successful construction company, a beautiful home overlooking the ocean, and a wife I trusted more than anyone. Her name was Vivian. She was elegant, intelligent, and the kind of woman who could convince anyone of anything with just a smile. For 14 years, I never questioned her. Until one ordinary Tuesday, she walked into my office carrying a folder. "I need your signature," she said casually. "What is it?" She barely looked up. "Just some paperwork for our accountant." I trusted her, so I reached for the pen. But just before signing, my phone rang. It was my attorney. "I need to see you immediately." Something in his voice made me put the pen down. Vivian's smile disappeared for the first time in years. "Can this wait?" she asked. "No," I replied. "I'll sign it later." She tried to hide it, but I saw a panic flash across her face. That was the moment I knew. The papers in front of me weren't ordinary, and if I had signed them, I would have lost everything I had spent my entire life building. I drove straight to my attorney's office. The moment I walked in, he closed the door. "Alexander, don't sign anything your wife gives you." My stomach tightened. "Why?" He slid a stack of papers across the desk. "They were sent to my office by mistake this morning." I looked down. The document looked almost identical to the one Vivian had handed me. Almost, until I read the fine print. Hidden among dozens of pages was a clause transferring 49% of my company into a newly created family trust. The trustee wasn't me. It wasn't even Vivian. It was her brother, Nathan Mercer, a man who had never worked a single day for my business. I looked up in disbelief. "This has to be fake." My attorney slowly shook his head. "No, it's professionally prepared. Someone spent months planning this." I suddenly remembered something. Over the past year, Vivian had insisted that her brother become more involved in my company. She claimed he wanted to learn the business. Instead, he had quietly gained access to financial records, employee contracts, company accounts, everything. My attorney leaned forward. "If you had signed these papers, you would have lost control of your own company." For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then I asked the question I was afraid to hear. "Was Vivian working alone?" He hesitated. "I don't think so." He handed me another document, a list of recent phone records. One name appeared over and over again. Marcus Hale, my financial advisor, the man who had managed my investments for nearly 12 years. I stared at the page. "No." My attorney nodded. "I'm afraid so. The two people I trusted most, my wife and my financial advisor, had been talking almost every day for months, without me knowing." I leaned back in my chair. The betrayal hurt, but the lies hurt even more. Then my attorney smiled. "They think you still haven't signed." I looked at him. "What are you saying?" He smiled again. "Let's make sure they keep believing that." For the first time since this nightmare began, I realized I still had one enormous advantage. They thought I was the victim. They had no idea. I had just become the one in control. For the next 10 days, I pretended everything was normal. I kissed Vivian goodbye every morning. We had dinner together every evening. She kept asking the same question. "Did you sign the papers yet?" Every time I smiled. "Not yet." Each answer made her more impatient. One evening, I noticed something unusual. She stepped outside to take a phone call. She almost never did that. I quietly opened the patio door just enough to hear her voice. "I can't keep delaying him forever." A man's voice answered through the speaker. "It has to be this week." "I know. What if he starts asking questions?" "He won't. We've planned this for over a year." My heart sank. Over a year. This wasn't an impulsive betrayal. It was a carefully planned operation. The next morning, my attorney called. "We found something else." I drove to his office immediately. This time he wasn't alone. A forensic accountant was waiting for me. He opened a laptop and projected several bank transfers onto the wall. Large sums of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. quietly moved through shell companies over the previous 18 months. Every transfer ended in the same place, an offshore account, owned by Nathan Mercer, Vivian's brother. But that wasn't the worst part. The accountant clicked one more file. Another name appeared beside Nathan's, Marcus Hale, my financial advisor. The two of them weren't just helping Vivian. They were already stealing from me. For months, I stared at the screen in disbelief. How much? The accountant looked down at his notes. We've confirmed nearly $2.8 million. I closed my eyes. The affair, the fake documents, the secret calls. None of it had ever been about love. It had always been about money. Then my attorney leaned across the table. We've already contacted federal investigators. They're watching every transaction now. I looked at him. What happens next? A slow smile crossed his face. We let them believe they're about to win. And then, we take everything back. At that moment, my phone buzzed. A message from Vivian. Dinner tonight? I have something special planned. I stared at the screen, then smiled. She thought she was preparing to celebrate her victory. She had no idea. The people waiting for her at dinner wouldn't just be me. They would be investigators with enough evidence to destroy everyone involved. That evening, I arrived at our favorite restaurant. Vivian was already waiting. She looked stunning. Red dress, diamond earrings, the same smile that had fooled me for 14 years. She stood and kissed my cheek. I'm glad you came. I smiled. So am I. She ordered champagne before I even sat down. Tonight is special. I know. She thought we were celebrating. I knew we were saying goodbye. Halfway through dinner, she reached into her designer handbag. The folder. Again. She gently placed it in front of me. Can we finally get this done? I looked at the papers, then at her. She reached across the table and took my hand. You trust me, don't you? For years, that question would have been easy. Tonight, it meant nothing. I picked up the pen. Vivian smiled. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. She believed she had won. Just as the pen touched the paper, a voice interrupted us. Mr. Vaughn. We both looked up. 3 people stood beside our table. 2 federal investigators. And my attorney. Vivian's smile disappeared instantly. One investigator placed a badge on the table. Mrs. Vaughn, we need to ask you a few questions regarding financial fraud and conspiracy. She looked at me in complete shock. Then at the folder. Then back at me. Alexander. I calmly placed the pen on the table. I was never going to sign. The investigator opened another folder. Inside were bank records, wire transfers, emails, phone logs, every secret meeting, every hidden account, every fake document. Marcus Hale walked into the restaurant a few seconds later. He had no idea what was happening. The moment he saw the investigators, he froze. Then another man entered. Nathan Mercer, Vivian's brother. He stopped in the doorway. The room fell silent. 3 conspirators, 1 table, and nowhere left to run. Vivian looked at me with tears in her eyes. You set me up. I slowly shook my head. No. You set yourself up the day you decided my trust was worth more than my love. One investigator turned to Nathan. Mr. Mercer, you are under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. The restaurant became completely silent. People stopped eating. Phones came out. Everyone watched. The celebration Vivian had imagined had turned into the worst night of her life. And it was only the beginning, because by sunrise, the headlines would know their names. The next morning, every major business news outlet carried the same headline. Prominent financial advisor and business executive under federal investigation. Vivian's photograph was everywhere. So were Nathan's and Marcus's. Within hours, banks froze their accounts. The board suspended every executive connected to the fraud. Several investors immediately filed civil lawsuits. The empire they had spent years trying to steal collapsed in a single day. Meanwhile, I returned to the office. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Then my assistant knocked on my door. "Mr. Vaughn, your wife is here." I looked through the glass wall. Vivian sat quietly in the reception area. She looked nothing like the confident woman from the restaurant. Her makeup was gone. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I asked my assistant to let her in. The moment the door closed behind her, she started crying. I never wanted it to go this far. I looked at her calmly. "You had over a year to stop." She lowered her head. "I thought Nathan knew what he was doing. I trusted Marcus." I almost laughed. "So you trusted two people while betraying the one person who never betrayed you?" She couldn't answer, because it was true. After several minutes of silence, she reached into her purse. This time there wasn't another contract. There was only one envelope. She slid it across my desk. Inside was her wedding ring. "I don't deserve to wear it anymore." I looked at the ring. For years it had represented loyalty. Now it represented the biggest lie of my life. Then Vivian whispered, "If I could go back." I gently interrupted her. "But you can't." Fresh tears rolled down her face. "I still love you." For a long moment, I simply looked at her. Then I answered honestly, "I believe you think you do. But people don't spend 18 months planning to destroy the person they love." She closed her eyes. Every word hit harder than the last. As she stood to leave, she turned around one final time. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about it. Then I nodded. One day, hope appeared on her face, until I finished my sentence. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll ever trust you again." She understood. Some things can be repaired. Trust isn't always one of them. She quietly walked out of my office, and that was the last time I ever saw her. A few weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my home, watching the sunset. The company was safe. The investigation was over. The people who betrayed me were facing the consequences of their own choices. I had lost a marriage, but I hadn't lost myself. And in the end, that turned out to be worth far more than anything they had tried to steal.